faces, worn out places, worn out faces, bright and early for their daily races, going nowhere, going nowhere. Their tears are filling up their glasses, no expression, no expression. Hide my head, I wanna drown my sorrow. No tomorrow, no tomorrow. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world.
I've gone from learning about the Delphi murders while listening to a podcast called True Crime Garage to creating YouTube videos to spread awareness about the case and to encourage people to tip in relevant information to law enforcement, hoping that a little nudge would make someone who knew something say something. And then before I knew it, I was interviewing my favorite podcasters, former FBI agents, Hollywood producers, and was even being asked to help with cold cases. Things were moving fast, but then this case became extremely real. I've seen things I can't unsee. And now, when I think about the Delphi case, I think of two distinct phases: before the crime scene photos and after the crime scene photos. I just hope that people realize that this is not a game and it's not a contest. Two innocent young girls were brutally murdered and left alone in the woods. Now, looking back, there are some things that just make a lot of sense now, things that are hard to put into words.
This is emotional for all of us. I can tell you that it's not easy, and a lot of people are putting a lot of work into this, and we're hoping that the tip's there, and we're going to find it.
In October 2022, Rick Allen was arrested for the murders of Libby German and Abigail Williams, which occurred February 13th, 2017. It took 6 years to arrest this man who was seemingly hiding in plain sight. He actually came forward as a witness and was interviewed by a conservation officer shortly after the murders, and somehow that interview wasn't logged into the tip system correctly, and Rick Allen wasn't contacted again until October of 2022. Something prompted law enforcement to go back into their Orion tip system to look for Richard Allen specifically, but what exactly prompted them is still unknown. Since the arrest of Rick Allen in October 2022, this case has gradually lost focus of the victims, Libby and Abby, due to it being overshadowed by a courtroom circus, media frenzy, and online mania, which likely led to a man taking his own life. This was shortly after crime scene photos were leaked by Rick Allen's defense team. Well, now former defense team. Saying this case has gone mad is an understatement.
Time today, there are also new filings in the Delphi double murders case. Authorities arrested and charged a man for the leak of crucial crime scene evidence.
Now, he's accused of taking photographs of crime scene pictures with his cell phone.
Fox 59's Russ McQuaid has been following this story today, and he's breaking it all down for us now.
Mitch Westerman was a coffee-drinking buddy of his former boss, former Delphi defense attorney Andrew Baldwin, when investigators say he got into Baldwin's conference room and took photographs of something he shouldn't have. Mitch Westerman admitted to the court that it was probably in late summer when he visited defense attorney Andrew Baldwin and was told to wait in a conference room. That's where he spotted crime scene photographs depicting the bodies of Abby Williams and Libby German near the Monon High Bridge outside of Delphi in February of 2017. Investigators allege Westerman passed on the photographs of the photographs he took to a Delphi Facebook poster, who then distributed them to other Delphi social media followers, leading to outrage by Delphi Special Judge Fran Gull and the eventual resignations of Richard Allen's attorneys, Baldwin and Bradley Rosie. The definition of misdemeanor conversion is a person who knowingly or intentionally exerts unauthorized control over property of another person. An offender can receive a $5,000 fine or a year in jail. Mitch Westerman has already bonded out of the Johnson County Jail this afternoon. This is just the latest tailspin in the Delphi case, and this leak led to the suicide of a social media Delphi follower.
What a disaster in Delphi. As if it wasn't bad enough that those two beautiful, innocent girls were murdered and the road to justice for their families very long. Now that police have a suspected killer in custody, there's a legal battle getting more and more intense by the minute. But it's not who you think it's between. We have the attorneys who recently withdrew, now trying to stay on the case, essentially saying that they were strong-armed by the judge to withdraw after that evidence leak. They're saying that the judge gave them a Hobson's choice. You withdraw privately, keep your dignity, or you'll be publicly admonished for gross negligence. So now they want the judge disqualified from the case. And the judge is saying, oh no, you don't get to motion this court for anything because you're already off the case. Taking it so far as to tell the clerk of court to strike their filings from the record. The judge has appointed two brand new attorneys for Richard Allen. So how did it become such a bungled legal mess? Oh, I know. The leaked photographic evidence of the crime scene, which originated in defense attorney Andrew Baldwin's office. He said the leak happened because a friend betrayed his trust and didn't respect his office space. So of course that evidence leak outraged the judge, as it should. It was outrageous.
This morning, a new twist in the Delphi double murders. Defense attorneys for suspect Richard Allen claiming members of a pagan religious group linked to white nationalists are behind the 2017 murders of Abby Williams and Libby German, not their client. Allen's attorneys filing a 136-page motion on Monday where they claim the girls were ritualistically sacrificed by members of a pagan Norse religion called Odinism.
So what caused all this craziness? Well, a lot had to do with the strategies that the defense was trying to execute. Let me explain. Rick Allen's former attorneys employed common defense strategies to counter the overwhelming evidence against him. This includes challenging confessions, scrutinizing witness credibility, questioning forensic evidence, and presenting alternative theories such as this Odinist angle. Let's go over the 8 common defense strategies now. Number 1, challenge the confessions. Defense attorneys will do everything in their power to get any and all confessions thrown out. And note, the most damning type of confession and most difficult to get thrown out is when a confession is made without being interrogated by law enforcement. You know, the ones where you're telling a family member that you're guilty of the crime that you're being charged with. Common practice number 2 is to examine witness credibility. The goal here is to analyze all the witness statements and to try and get them thrown out or discredited. Number 3 is to question any and all forensic evidence against your client, especially evidence that ties your client to the crime scene, like the unspent .40 caliber round that connects Rick Allen to the crime scene. Number 4 is to create reasonable doubt. And a great way to cause reasonable doubt is to use defense strategy number 5, which is provide an alternative suspect theory. Presenting theories like the Odinist theory aim to take the focus away from the accused and redirect that focus into basically anyone else. The 6th common strategy is to claim mitigating circumstances. And this is extremely important if the defendant has admitted their guilt. It is common for defenses to initially suggest their client was under duress or that they were having mental health issues during the time of their confession. And you could see that's what happened in Rick Allen's case with his former defense. They used this common strategy to support their client. The 7th strategic move I want to discuss is defense attorneys should always scrutinize law enforcement procedures, looking for mistakes or procedures that were not followed correctly, such as the chain of custody for evidence. And finally, defense strategy 101, number 8, is effective storytelling. This strategy spills over into some of the other strategies I just mentioned. Now, we've seen Rick Allen's former defense attempt at using this common strategy when they created that 136-page Odinist manifesto. Now, what they were trying to do was attempt to create reasonable doubt. I just wanted to bring these to your attention so you could recognize which strategies have been used so far, and so you could keep an eye out for them when Rick Allen's new team becomes more active. My guess is We'll see these again.
Prosecutors say he has confessed to the murders multiple times while in custody, but his attorneys argue that's unreliable because of his deteriorating mental health.
Right now, what do you make of this? You read it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating narrative, right? Where they lay out all the possible reasons why it could be this cult and all the rituals and the way that the bodies were found, etc. But this is really more the kind of argument you hear at trial when a defendant is saying, why didn't they investigate this? Or why didn't they investigate that? What it doesn't address is the evidence against him, right?
Now, let's talk about how discovery helped eliminate key suspects. The prosecution handed over exculpatory evidence, witness statements, crime scene photos, as well as police reports. These police reports surely included reports on Ron Logan, Kagan Klein, and Tony Klein. And with all that information at their disposal, knowing they needed to point a finger at anyone other than Rick Allen, the defense went with an Odinist cult that killed these girls as part of a ritual sacrifice. So that tells me there's absolutely no evidence that connects Ron Logan or the Kleins to the Delphi murders. And I believe Richard Allen acted alone. I believe the crime scene was staged so that it would throw off law enforcement, which it sure seems like it did. But being a process engineer and conducting hundreds of time studies, I could assure you that the staging that took place can indeed be done by a single, solitary man acting alone, even without superhuman dexterity. But what about the prosecutor stating at the arrest press conference that other actors were involved? Well, I'm glad you brought that up.
This investigation is still very ongoing. We're keeping the tip line open, the tip email open. We encourage everybody to continue to call in tips, not only about Richard Allen, but about any other person that you may have.
Did he have an accomplice? As the suspect in the Down the Hill murder case makes his first court appearance, a prosecutor makes a stunning revelation. We believe Richard Allen is not the only actor involved in this.
Now let's talk about the prosecution's strategy. In October 2022, prosecutor Nick McClelland stated he believes there are other actors involved in the Delphi murders. This might sound like a big revelation, but actually, it's a standard tactic in law enforcement, and prosecutors actually state this quite often. The number one reason you want to say that other actors are involved is so that you could keep the investigation active and open. And here's why law enforcement and the prosecution would want to keep an active investigation, even after making an arrest. 1. It's a legal strategy that shows they've conducted a thorough investigation. The prosecutor mentioned other possible suspects to demonstrate they are not narrowly focused on just one person. This approach defends against any claims of a one-sided investigation, especially by the defense. 2. More tips and witnesses. There might be even more witnesses out there, or people who were too scared to give a tip on certain things. 3. Public perception. This strategy communicates to the public that the police and prosecution are dedicated to uncovering the complete truth, leaving no stone unturned. 4. Flexibility in the investigation. Keeping the investigation status as active allows law enforcement to adapt as new evidence or leads come to light. It avoids being boxed in by early conclusions. 5. Preparing for legal proceedings. An active investigation status is helpful for legal strategies. It keeps the door open for new evidence or leads that might emerge as the case progresses. And 6, resource allocation. Declaring an ongoing investigation could justify the continued allocation of resources to the case. It could help in securing ongoing funding, manpower, and other resources necessary for the comprehensive investigative work. In summary, law enforcement and prosecution suggest the possibility of other actors, not necessarily because they believe others are involved, but because it helps keep the investigation open for all the reasons that I just mentioned.
But we can note that when Richard Allen's house was searched late last year, in the search warrant return, if you will, or the inventory that came out of his house, it notes that there were 13 different knives, along with a .40 caliber handgun that were taken from his home. Also of note that a blue Carhartt coat was found inside of his home. You may remember that earlier reports before Allen's arrest indicated that there was a man in a blue jacket that they were looking for.
In the 136-page defense manifesto, they eventually get around to discussing evidence that they feel supports Richard Allen being innocent. I think it's important to understand what they say here, but it's equally important to acknowledge the things that they don't say here. And keep in mind, these claims were made before the defense picked up all the evidence from the prosecution. As of September 18th, 2023, the defense claims no DNA links Richard Allen to the crime scene. It's still unclear if the killer's DNA was left at the crime scene. And if there was no DNA left at the crime scene, then of course Richard Allen's DNA wouldn't have been left at the crime scene. Side note, the more people that are at a crime scene, the more likely DNA is to be left there. So if no DNA was found, I would say it's more likely one person committed the murders instead of 3 or 4 Odinists. I digress. So if there was no DNA that links Richard Allen to the crime scene, was there items found at Richard Allen's house or in his car that linked the crime scene to him, such as souvenirs or blood? I think if there wasn't, this would be a major point the defense would want to make abundantly clear. No data extracted from Richard Allen's phone connects him to the murders. So what about data from an anonymous phone, maybe a burner phone, or did he have an iPad? Why did Richard Allen himself say that he was on the trails that day and at the bridge on his cell phone if there's no connection? Interesting. No data extracted from Libby's phone connected Richard to the murders. What if data was downloaded from a cloud? Does that still count as extracted? And why only mention Libby's phone? Do we truly know that Abby didn't have a phone? We know she had an iPad. Does data extracted from Abby's iPad connect Richard to the murders? There is no evidence that Richard Allen is or was connected to any other suspects in the case. Well, of course, because he acted alone. But who are the other suspects the defense is referring to here? Do they mean the Odinist crew, or did they mean the Kleins or Ron Logan? I'm curious. There is no social media evidence found on social media that connects Richard Allen to the murders. Not found, so who was looking, and how hard did they look? Did they subpoena any of the social media companies? There is no evidence extracted from Richard Allen's computers that connects him to the murders. So what about evidence that was extracted from his external hard drive that's on his computer, or from his SD cards? Still not his computer. There's no fingerprint evidence that connects Richard Allen to the murders. They're very specific here. Okay, so no fingerprints, but what about other forensic evidence like hair or rope fibers? And again, I want to point out, these statements were made before the defense had all the evidence. So as compelling as they seem, those statements might change after reviewing all of the new evidence that was presented after they made these statements.
But prosecutors allege an unspent bullet discovered near the bodies links Allen to the crime.
Every crime, no matter how bizarre, no matter how many things, artifacts, structuring of bodies, how they were killed, all of that stuff's important, but you still have to place people at the crime scene. And in this case, the defendant, they've been able to place at the crime scene.
Allen admitted to authorities he was on the trail the day of the murders, but has pleaded not guilty.
On February 13th, 2017, Libby and Abby were dropped off at the trails at roughly 1:45 p.m. They were abducted around 2:10 p.m. and were murdered by 3:30 p.m. that same day. Now, if you recall, Richard Allen came forward to law enforcement a few days after the murders, and the exact date of this interview is unknown, but if Rick's pool buddy was referring to him in this Facebook post here, then the interview likely took place on February 14th or 15th. And what's significant about this interview is that Rick Allen stated that he was on the trails the same day and time that Libby and Abby were there and killed. As he stated, he was there from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. However, when police talked to Richard Allen in October of 2022, his story changed, and now he conveniently claims that he was at the trails from 12 p.m. to 1:30, not 1:30 to 3:30. So now he's saying that he was there before the girls were abducted and murdered, because of course he would say that. And I will remind everyone that our memories do not get better over time, they actually get worse. So the most likely accurate statement was from 2017, not 2022. However, I do want to note that the 2017 interview was not recorded because apparently Mr. Doolin forgot to record it, but I guess he did take down some notes, and this was verified by Richard Allen himself, saying that he saw Dan Doolin scribble down some notes during their conversation in 2017. In that 136-page manifesto, Rick Allen's defense made a big deal about Rick Allen being at the trails from 12 to 1:30 p.m. and then being home at least until 4 p.m. They mentioned several times that he was at home during the murders. However, one thing that they failed to do was provide any evidence of his whereabouts that day. They didn't say anything like, we have cell phone data showing that Richard Allen was at home from 12 to 5 p.m. on February 13th. I would expect the defense to have said Rick was home with his wife all day, or Rick was at the store during that time, and here's a bank record to show that he made a purchase during this time. Or best of all, they could have said something like, Rick Allen couldn't have committed the murders because he was at work at CVS, and here's the proof. Well, they didn't, and no wonder the defense wanted to try and quash the subpoena to CVS. They knew that Rick wasn't at work and he didn't have an alibi. And Rick Allen being at home is a very weak alibi, right, defense team? I mean, you said it yourself when you accused Mr. Westfall of the murders. On page 17 of 136, you wrote, additionally, Westfall provided a very weak alibi as to his whereabouts on February 13th, 2017. Westfall told law enforcement that he, Westfall, was at home that afternoon on Monday, February 13th, 2017. So if it's a weak alibi for Mr. Westfall, then it's also a weak alibi for Rick Allen. Okay, so regardless when Rick Allen was there at the trails from either 12 p.m. to 1:30 or 1:30 p.m. to 3:30, or maybe he was even there from 12 p.m. to 3:30, who knows? But what I want to know is why didn't he come forward in 2019 when ISP Superintendent Doug Carter asked for the public's help in identifying a driver parked at the old CPS building, and that's where Rick Allen parked. Despite him calling it the old Farm Bureau building, he was just playing dumb.
We're seeking the public's help to identify the driver of a vehicle that was parked at the old CPS DCS welfare building in the city of Delphi that was abandoned on the east side of County Road 300 North next to the Hoosier Heartland Highway between the hours of noon to 5. If you were parked there or know who was parked there, please contact the officers at the command post.
So Rick changing his alibi is just one of the many reasons why the search warrant they executed on his house and car was totally justified.
They're talking about what other evidence that they might have found, they could have found, they should have focused on, and they don't really address a lot the evidence against him, and as you heard it there in the piece, which is this bullet, the fact that he's placing himself at the scene, and the confession.
The search warrant for Rick Allen was justified, and here's 5 reasons why. Number 1, he was at the crime scene during the time the girls were abducted and killed. Richard Allen put himself there at the crime scene during the time of the murders. This self-incriminating statement places him at the location where the crime occurred, aligning with the timeline of events. Second reason is the eyewitness accounts. Witness statements placing a man resembling Allen at or near the crime scene strengthen the rationale for the search warrant. Richard Allen himself stated he saw the same witnesses that saw him. Now, eyewitness accounts, although subject to reliability issues, are a standard component in establishing probable cause for a search warrant. Reason number 3, the clothing match. Richard Allen himself stated he was dressed identically to the person that was captured in Libby German's cell phone recording. 4, forensic evidence. There was a .40 caliber unspent round that was found at the crime scene. Forensic analysis determined this round has been cycled through a firearm owned by Richard Allen. This direct link between the evidence at the crime scene and Allen's possession of the firearm constitutes strong probable cause. And the 5th reason, changing his alibi. Initially, Allen provided an alibi that placed him at the trails during the time of the murders, and then he later changed that alibi so that the time he claimed to be there didn't overlap with the time of the murders. So with the totality of evidence, the combination of physical evidence, self-incriminating statements, and circumstantial details collectively create a substantial basis for probable cause, justifying the issuance of a search warrant in pursuit of further evidence.
So the key legal argument here is the search warrant should have been invalid because there were things that were wrong. They're saying that the investigators lied. But you can't just throw out everything you find in a search warrant because there were mistakes made, right? The color of the jacket, was it mud versus blood, etc. You have to show that there was some level of intentional conduct by the investigators to try to fool the court. That's a very high standard.
No less than 5 times while talking to his wife and his mother on the public jail phones.
The suspect confessed to the killings in a phone call with his wife.
Richard Allen may have made self-incriminating statements.
Stated that Allen confessed 5 or 6 times.
Made several confessions.
Admitted to killing Abigail Williams and Libby German.
On March 24th, 2023, a significant amount of evidence was turned over to the defense team, and when the defense team was reviewing it with their client, Richard Allen, he allegedly started to eat some of the documents. A little over a week later, on April 3rd, 2024, while on a phone call, Rick Allen admits several times that he killed Abby and Libby to his wife and his mother. The call was recorded and transcribed, and it shows him admitting to the crimes multiple times. This has been acknowledged by the prosecution and by the defense. This admission of guilt must have sent his legal team into a panic because 2 days after his confessions, they immediately kick Defense Strategy 101, number 6, into high gear. They claim that Rick was being treated like a prisoner of war while being held at the prison. On April 14th, 2023, Rick Allen was evaluated by 2 psychiatrists and 1 psychologist to discuss his recent turn in behavior and to see if he needed any involuntary medication. Well, it was determined Rick did not need any involuntary medication, and this could be used as proof that Rick Allen didn't have any mental problems. There's no evidence for it. And in the October 19th, 2023 pre-hearing powwow transcripts, Judge Gohl even states to Baldwin and Rosie, in regard to Richard Allen's mental health records, I'm going to grant the defendant's motion to quash, but if you continue to raise his medical mental health in pleadings, that's fair game then for that to be provided to the state. So she basically told them if they want to F around, then the state's going to find out. And after Rick Allen was deemed mentally sound, he started behaving more like his usual self before the confessions. So nice try, Rick, in defense. I guess it was worth a shot, though. So all of this makes me think and wonder what evidence came in that discovery that made Richard Allen start eating paper and made the defense go into Defensive 101 strategy mode. If I was to guess, I think maybe they found some DNA in Richard Allen's car, likely some blood on his seatbelt, or maybe there was some blood in the trunk of his car from stashing clothes or a weapon in there. And I only think this because the defense made a lot of claims at why Rick Allen's innocent, but one claim they never made is that there was nothing found at the home or vehicle of Richard Allen that connects him to the crime. So let's get back to the confessions. Once the defense couldn't use the mental health excuse anymore for the confessions, the defense had to come up with a new explanation for why Richard Allen confessed to the murders to his wife and mom 5 to 6 times. So what did they come up with? It was the prison guards who forced Richard Allen to confess, not to the police, but to his wife and mom, because corruption, that's why. I don't know why. But to clear up some confusion about the threats from the guards who follow Odinism, it didn't happen. It was actually clarified in a footnote, footnote 15 to be exact, that Rick Allen never actually told his lawyers that he was threatened. The footnote just points out that it was tough for Allen to have private chats with his lawyers in jail, but there's no direct claim or evidence that he was threatened into a confession. And still, why would someone make Allen confess to his wife but not the police? It doesn't make sense.
Okay, but what about Elvis Fields?
Well, so the defense alleges that a man named Elvis Fields also confessed to the murders. So why is Rick's confession more credible than Elvis's? Well, first the backstory. So Elvis Fields allegedly confessed to his sister that he was present at the killings of Libby and Abby, and that while at the crime scene, they used sticks to form horns on Abby's head. The problem with that is there were absolutely no horns or antlers placed on either of the girls' heads. That was a lie. But Elvis was questioned by law enforcement, but denied any involvement in the murders. However, after being dropped off at his trailer following the questioning, Elvis turned around, walked back to the police car, and asked the state trooper if he spit on one of the girls, would he still be in trouble if he could explain it away? That is very strange to say, I have to admit. But here's some problems with Elvis's alleged confessions compared to Rick's. One, we don't know for sure that Elvis confessed. It's hearsay. We have to believe his sister, I guess, but unlike his confession, Rick Allen's confessions were recorded and transcribed and acknowledged by both the defense and the prosecution. They happened. Second, Elvis Fields was described as having the mental capacity of a child around 7 or 8 years old. So this significantly undermines the credibility of his confession, and it raises questions about his ability to understand the situation or the implications of his statement. Whereas Rick Allen was an assistant manager at CVS and a certified pharmacy technician with no record of mental capacity issues. And third, Elvis Fields had no connection to the crime scene. Elvis lived 125 miles away and didn't have a car. And if he did truly spit on one of the girls, he would have left his DNA there, so there would have been a connection. But that didn't happen. And since there was no connection, you could tell that the defense was frustrated. So what they did was they fabricated that story about Elvis leaving horns on one of the girls. That never happened. Therefore, there's no connection between Elvis Fields and the crime scene, unlike Rick Allen, who left his .40 caliber bullet casing there at the crime scene.
Think about it. In so many high-profile cases, we have seen theories, right, that have been presented about, drug dealers who actually did it, about Satanists who actually did it, etc. you got to start from the point of what's the evidence against my client. If you can undermine that evidence, then I think a jury could be receptive to hearing other possible theories. But that's the first thing you got to deal with.
The idea of Richard Allen being framed as a patsy for political purposes is implausible and unsupported by any legal and political realities. The complexity and risk involved in such a conspiracy makes it highly unlikely. Framing someone as a patsy, particularly for a crime of this magnitude, would involve an elaborate conspiracy requiring falsification of evidence and coordinated collusion within the justice system. Not saying it's impossible, but is it probable? Absolutely not. And if they were going to frame a guy such as Richard Allen, someone with no criminal history, why would they only use an unspent .40 caliber round with extraction markings? Yes, it's evidence, but why not add some DNA? Besides, choosing someone with no criminal history as a patsy seems counterintuitive, when a more convincing idea would be to involve someone who is already under suspicion, such as Ron Logan or Kagan Klein or a registered sex offender. Anyone with some criminal history. They're so smart to pull off this extreme conspiracy, but they're not smart enough to pick someone with a criminal history. I'm not buying it. Successful campaigns are built over time. You would at least think they would have known to start campaigning a year ahead of time like a normal political campaign. The arrest timing being mere days before the election is more likely to be a coincidence rather than a calculated move related to this electoral process. So there's no conspiracy here, folks. Sorry. Some folks tend to believe in conspiracy theories because they're naturally skeptical, or they feel unique in knowing something that others don't. Or maybe they might not trust what officials say, think there's always some secret plot behind big events. This phenomenon is called conspiracy mentality. And instead of thinking there's a big, complicated conspiracy with lots of people involved, Occam's razor would tell us to look for the answer that's the easiest to prove and doesn't need a lot of extra assumptions. Occam's razor is a principle that suggests the simplest explanation requiring the fewest assumptions is often the most likely to be correct. It's not always correct, but it's most likely. So here's how it could be used for deciding who is most likely responsible for the Delphi murders. Is it Rick Allen or is it the Odinists that are involved? Let's first look at Rick Allen. The case against Rick Allen includes his own admissions of guilt in a recorded conversation, his presence at the crime scene during the relevant time, and there's physical evidence that links him to the crime scene with the unspent .40 caliber round linked to his firearm. This scenario requires fewer speculative leaps and is grounded in tangible evidence, as compared to the Odinists being involved. For the Odinists, this theory necessitates assuming the existence of a local Odinist cult with violent tendencies. We have to assume that one exists. We also have to assume the motive for killing 2 white girls if this cult was hijacked by white supremacists. We also have to assume why they were able to commit this crime undetected and why multiple people were able to keep their mouths shut, knowing they could have just blamed it on the other. And there's also a lack of direct forensic evidence linking them to the scene. So all in all, the simplest explanation is Rick Allen was arrested for the murders because Rick Allen committed the murders. And also, there's one guy on the bridge that we could see and hear. Therefore, there's one killer. So my advice is, if you want the truth, start simple and then go from there. Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, and other times it's just not. I don't think this case was as complicated or complex as people make it seem, especially law enforcement. I think they made it way more complicated than it needed to be. The answer was right under their nose this entire time. I've observed a trend among those advocating for Richard Allen's innocence. They seem to be driven by being correct, proving a point, pride, and emotion, instead of being driven by logical analysis to uncover facts or the truth. I think this comes from when before Richard Allen was arrested, many people would publicly declare that they knew who the Delphi killer was, but none of them guessed that it was Rick Allen. And now, rather than admitting they were wrong, they say that law enforcement was wrong and they are corrupt and it's a conspiracy. They're just simply crafting a world of make-believe populated with imaginary people doing imaginary things just to maintain their credibility on social media. Even if what they claim to believe is just a figment of their imagination, they want you to believe it too. Hopefully you enjoyed this long-winded video, and I wish everyone who watches this the best of luck, and let's try not to get too involved in cases, and remember to take mental health breaks.
fear what you found. When the weather comes on, tearing down, there'll be oats in the water, there'll be birds on the ground, there'll be things you never asked her, or how they tear at you now. I'll take the long way round. Oh, I'll find my own way down. Oh, as I should. And hold your gaze. There's coke in the Midas touch. A joke in the way that we rush and breathe again. And you fear what you found. No weather comes on, tearing down. There'll be oats in the water, there'll be birds on the ground, there'll be things you never asked her, or how they tear at you now.
Robert Kyle, Lawless Warrior, was passionate about the Delphi murder case and truly seemed like he wanted justice for Libby and Abby. He was an extremely intelligent person and never hesitated to share his opinions in a respectful manner. I find myself wishing that circumstances had allowed us to become closer friends. May he rest in peace.